You know, there's been a lot of game changers recently in the film space, and this certainly is one of them. This is a really cool setup by a local company called Blackwing. And if you ever watched a Hollywood movie or maybe a TV show where you've got that really cool shot of the car that looks like, well, you're 2 feet away from it, Blackwing does that. And in this video, we're going to meet the people behind Blackwing, and we're going to get to know about that rig. Miriam, this is a really cool rig that you've got here. Obviously, you're into video production in a very serious way. So first of all, tell me about the company and how you got started.
The company was started by myself and my business partner, John Firestone, who you'll be hearing from shortly. The way that it got started was John and I have been friends for quite a while. We worked on a lot of projects together. He's a terrific director of photography, cinematographer. I'm a lesser director of photography and cinematographer than he is, but we've always been into gear, and he was an early adopter of gimbal technology, and this is kind of an extension of his dream. You know, the gimbal is something that he has an incredible level of mastery over, and I've come to appreciate that more and more as we've worked with this head. So he gets great footage from this thing, and you know, he's a master.
So there are really 4 parts to this, right? There's the camera, there's the gimbal, there's the arm, and then there's the Polaris. So let's kind of go through them and talk about each one. So let's start with the one that I'm most familiar with, which is the Polaris. Why'd you guys choose a Polaris?
Well, so we have this arm that, you know, not normally now, but typically we ran it off a Porsche Cayenne Turbo. Yep. And we got a call from some connections of John, and they wanted to do a desert gig, and they wanted us to run it on, you know, a Polaris, on a Razor. And so we went to a rental house in Denver and got a Razor, and we went out to the desert and we built the rig, and you know, we solved a lot of the problems that come when you're building a rig for the first time, like putting interior monitors on the inside. How are we going to rig those for stability, and how are we going to power them? And you know, so we solved a bunch of those issues. Did the gig, got very jazzed by it, and then found some other opportunities and thought to ourselves, well, we might as well invest. This is Colorado, right? And we've also got snow tracks for this rig, so we can do snow work in the wintertime.
So you've got the Polaris, which is obviously good for off-road use. You've got the Cayenne for on-road use, and then you've got the arm. So tell me about the arm.
So the arm, this is a fairly new technology. We, again, because we're gearheads, we were early adopters of this arm, and this company out of Minnesota called Motocrane, their name's on the front, was interested in developing a technology that could compete with the Russian arm, which, you know, those are very, very expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars pieces of equipment. And so they kind of went after that market. And we were kind of excited by that. There was nothing like this in Colorado, so we decided to invest in it. And you know, they put out a smaller arm early, and it just wasn't competing enough with the Russian Arm Mini. We were able to upgrade from the early arm technology into this current arm technology, which really is a match according to the specs of the Russian arm. I think it's actually like 6 inches longer than the Russian Arm Mini. So that's how we got into it, because we couldn't afford, there's no way, especially in a small market like Colorado, it wouldn't have made sense to buy one of these. But with new technology coming out at new price points, this became an affordable,
yeah, affordable, that's
I
right.
use the term lightly, option for us.
And then you got the gimbal, which is what attaches to the arm and then stabilizes the camera. Tell me about that.
So we originally started with a smaller gimbal called a Ronin 2. It had about a 35-pound weight capacity, and this one is just rated higher. What we found, especially with coming in from out of town, a lot of the bigger budget productions want to use bigger lenses, heavier camera builds, and so again, as we've grown, we've kind of upgraded into the heavier duty technology. So we actually own 2 heads. The smaller head, which we can use, you know, still on our arm car, also on the end of this, and then we've got this bigger head, the Movi XL, which just more robust, better weight capacity.
And then finally, of course, the camera, and that's a pretty impressive camera. What do you got on there?
What we have on there is a red Epic W.
Shoots 8K, right?
It does shoot 8K,
Wow.
yeah, super high, ultra high resolution camera. It makes very pretty pictures, very versatile unit. This is kind of our go-to when we do events like this, or if we do practice runs. You actually want a little bit more weight on the end of the gimbal to give it some heft and some balance so that it's not bouncing around. A little bit of extra weight in the camera packages is something that's desirable. So we put a good solid digital cinema camera package on the end of it with a good solid digital cinema lens and all the other fixings.
So if our viewers are out there running an ad agency or part of a car company, what kind of services do you provide?
So we have done all kinds of things with this. I mean, obviously, when people hire us, we bring all of the gear.
Yep.
And that includes all the internal gear as well as all the external gear and the vehicle. And then we typically provide 3 personnel. So you need a driver who knows the vehicle, you need a boom operator, and you need a head operator. Now, some out of town, bigger budget jobs will want their DP to run the head, but we still need a head tech with the skills that John has, because if you really want the rock solid footage, so John will kind of double down as DP, head tech, or both, depending on what the situation calls for. More local jobs, and I have to say, his footage is usually better than most of the DPs that we bring in from
That's
out of
director
town
of photography.
because he spends so much time in the car.
Yeah.
He
knows it.
Yeah, he knows it, and he knows its performance. He knows, its parameters, and so, we get great footage from this thing. But a lot of people want to bring their DP in, and that's great. But we still bring him along because the stability factor and tuning the head is something that most people have not used. A lot of people used gimbals, but they haven't necessarily used them under this set of circumstances. You got to adjust for the judder of the vehicle and all these other factors that come into play.
And if you guys want a matte black Razor, well, you can't order them from Polaris. This was actually done because you don't want anything that reflects, of course, when you're shooting movies or commercials or any kind of filmmaking. And so, yeah, this is a very custom turbo Razor indeed. So, John, tell me, how'd you get into this? How'd you start?
So I like to move the camera. I'm
Yeah.
a DP that likes to move the camera. And when I got into my first gimbal, which is one of the early Mobies,
Yeah.
which is really the first popular
Stabilization.
first electronic stabilized
Yeah.
system. That changed my world. I stopped using tripods and dollies, and I switched completely to that. So I use that on jibs, and I use it on handheld, and I'll use it with a Segway, and I just use it all the time. So this was kind of like the next step. Was we were shooting out of cars a lot of times holding the gimbal or with a bungee rig, and Colorado didn't really have a setup like this, and so when this came out, it was just a natural way for me to move into the bigger car stuff.
I would say the drone has become a game changer in a lot of ways. Would you say this is the same for for this industry?
Yes, and I'm a drone operator also,
Yeah.
and that's the same thing. I'm operating on that end as well, and it's virtually, this technology came from the drone stuff. They were using these gimbals on drones, and then somebody realized that they could put handles on it and run around, and then we started throwing them on chips, and all that stabilization is, it's amazing.
All right, well, walk me through what you got set up, because there's a lot going on, right? I mean, you've got a Razor, but there's a lot more. So let's go through the setup here. Kind of show us how everything works.
Sure, yeah. This is the most complicated camera setup I've ever had, because it's not just a camera and a gimbal. It's a jib and it's a vehicle, and everything has to work together. And so what we have first, is obviously the Polaris Razor, and we got the turbo because we're hauling a lot of weight in here. And it's great because it's the first part of stabilization, because it takes out the bumps a lot more than the less that translates down the arm, the better. So this stabilizes a fair amount. Then we get into the arm, which we have a controller over here. The operator uses this controller, and they've got 2 controls. One that's going to swing the arm left and right, which is like this, and then this other one will go up and down. And so really there's some limits they can set to not drive it into the ground, but they really need to watch. This is one of the hardest jobs because you have to be aware of not just the front, but the back and anything that you're coming up on. Make sure that if the vehicle's going to dip, that you lift the camera so it doesn't drive into the ground. And it's you just have to be completely aware. The Razor's kind of nice compared to the Porsche because you have a lot more ability to see around you. There, everything's open. In the Porsche, a lot of times you don't know where the arm is, and if you're just looking at a monitor, you can be fooled as to where the arm is. So it's really important that you know where it is because you'll end up putting it into a tree or putting it into a car. So anyway, that's the first part right there. And then this person has their own monitor. The driver also is primarily paying attention to the road, but also they have a monitor if they want to look down and see what's going on with the shot and if they need to reposition or anything. The driver is really the person that's in control of every shot. We put them above the director or anybody else. The director will tell the driver what they want, but they're the one that's like mission critical. Like if they drive that arm into something, it's their fault. And I've heard of guys putting these things through windshields of their other cars and all that. So really, ultimately, it comes down to the driver is calling the shots, and they're making the calls to the picture car to tell them what to do, and they're kind of orchestrating everything. So the director may say they want a shot to happen, but it's really the driver that's going to initiate everything. And then back here is where I usually sit, and this is where I control the head. And if I drive this around, like I can reposition the head and point it, and this is where I also set any settings. If I'm getting any jitter in there, I can dial all that out. So I sit back here, and the fourth seat is usually occupied by an AC. So this assistant camera has the ability to pull focus, and so they've got this controller, and they can pull focus, and they can start and stop the camera generally, and they can also close up the iris and affect the zoom. So those are like the four seats in here, and we all have monitors so we can see what's going on.
Now you've got one other thing, and that's a cooler here, and that's because you've got batteries in here, right? Because this has to take a lot of power, right?
Yeah.
This has got to be pretty power heavy. So why do you have batteries in the cooler?
So there's a couple reasons we end up using a cooler. Out in the desert, it gets really, really hot, and the electronics are in here as well, and that can overheat. So we put it in a cooler, in a light colored cooler, to kind of insulate from the outside world, because we also have to worry about dust getting in here. So we needed something that could be sealed, so we have ice packs. We literally have ice packs in there to keep everything cool in there if we're in a dusty environment. So the motor controller's in there and the battery.
Let's go look at the gimbal on the camera.
Yeah.
Let's check out this setup over here.
Sure.
So obviously it's all remote because it has to be.
Yeah.
But talk to me about like how this stabilizes, because the Polaris already has a lot of suspension, but nevertheless, it's going to go up and down.
Right.
So how does that stabilization create those rock steady shots that we all see in the commercials?
Right. And so we've got this big isolator right here, and it's actually using like a bike shock. You see that right?
Oh yeah, right there, like a
shock right there.
Right there, almost like a rock shock.
Right, and this will take out the big bumps.
Okay.
And then after that, we've got a pivoting head right here, and you'll see that it can swing in any direction, which is good because we want some give to the system. And so this allows it to swing in any direction, and then we've got these shocks in here that keep it from swinging back and forth. It'll swing and then come back to position. So when we're adjusting this, we usually set it so that it settles pretty fast, and that in both of these directions. And then to take out like those micro vibrations, we've got a anti-vibration mount right here, and this one takes out kind of like the little tiny vibrations to some extent. And then the electronic gimbal stabilization in here, it's got 3 motors on, one here, one back here, and one here, and these each do the roll, pan, and tilt. And so it notices if it's pitching forward, it'll adjust for that. And so, like if you notice, if I swing this outwards, the camera still stays flat.
Pretty level, yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna keep itself level, and that's the stuff that you really notice if it's pitching up and down. So this is also another. So that all combined gives us a fairly.
And does the camera have any internal stabilization as well?
No.
No. So the camera is just is just completely dependent on the rest of the setup.
So the nice thing is it does have what they call, there's inertial dampening. So when you have a heavy weight, it doesn't like to change direction. So when you get a heavier camera, it does help to take out some of the vibrations because it just takes so much force to move it. So a lot of those small forces won't translate when you have a really heavy camera.
I see a battery here, I see batteries there. How long does it take to set all this up? I mean, when you show up at a shoot, does it take a long time, or do you have it pre-set up?
Yeah, well, we do as much pre as we can, which is usually, it depends on how different the shoot is from the last shoot. So if we have a lot of things still set up, it's not too bad. If we're starting from scratch, it can take a full day to set everything up. And if it's like we have to re-rig this arm from the Porsche to the Razor and back, and so it can be an ordeal just to swap that. That could be a couple hours to swap that. And if we're going from tracks to not. So, and then which camera package, what lenses. There's also another issue, like when we're shooting in snow and rain, is that there's you'll get rain and snow on the lens, and so we'll sometimes put a spray deflector in there, which is basically a spinning piece of glass that helps like throw the water off, but also when it's spinning fast enough, it kind of disappears, and so we have to deal with that stuff as well. And yeah, you're right, there's these huge massive batteries to run this guy, and fortunately these are also running the camera, so we don't need to run camera battery, we don't have to run follow focus battery. Everything on this end is running off these two massive batteries, and then each of the monitors has batteries, and if we're using a wireless system, which right now we're not, but if we're using a wireless video system, that's got batteries and follow focus and the controller. That's a lot of batteries.
It's a lot of batteries. And let me ask you this: where have people have seen your work? Like, give me some production that you've done that people may have seen.
Okay, so we worked on Shifting Gears with Aaron Kaufman, which is a spin-off of Fast and Loud.
Yep.
And then we worked on Fast and Loud in San Francisco. We recreated the bullet chase
scene.
Bullet chase,
yeah, that's pretty badass.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun. We closed down a lot of roads, and that was probably one of our higher profile ones. We've done, I think, Monday Night Football, Genesis ad. We've done Chevy commercials up in British Columbia, and we've done a bunch of different projects, mostly around here.
What's your what's the most challenging part of this whole setup for you?
Everything has to work on it.
There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah,
literally.
And it's if you normally you have like a camera department that's handling the camera, and you also have and then we could just focus on that part. On a lot of these gigs that we get on, they've already got their A camera unit doing their thing, and so we end up handling this part of it as well. And so we're handling and a lot of times just little things coming up, like the follow focus doesn't want to connect or something like that, or there's a cable that got yanked out when we didn't know.
And you got troubleshoot.
Yeah, and so there's just so many elements, and the communication thing is a big deal. More than anything else, there's a lot of pieces working together. There's virtually 5 people that have to be all in sync to make this work between the two drivers and the people in our vehicle, and also lockups and all that on the street.
And you ever in a situation where you got to get the shot, where it's you got one shot at it? That's got to be stressful too.
Yeah,
right? You got to get that. It's you can't redo it, but
Yeah, and that's the tough thing. Fortunately, most of our work is commercial, so we can reshoot. But a lot of times, the lighting is, at least when I'm doing live stuff. But yeah, there's just a short moment, and they're always trying to shoot more than you can in the amount of time. So you're trying to grab it as fast as possible, and yeah, it's challenging.
And then if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do it?
They go to our website.
Yeah, what is your website?
Our website is Blackwing ASL. ASL stands for Air Sea Land, so it's blackwingasl.com. And from there, they can link to our Vimeo page, which has all the samples, all of our work samples on there. We've got demo reels, and we've got us shooting an air show, and we have us shooting in the desert with our desert rig, and all kinds of work samples that they can have a look at just by clicking on the Vimeo link on the website. That would probably be the best way to go about it.
So it's not just cars, it's also horses, it's bikers, it's buildings, anything that's really cool and steady. The guys and gals at Blackwing can certainly do it for you. So check out their website, Blackwing, what was it?
BlackwingASL.com.
BlackwingASL.com. And thanks for watching. Remember, go back to TFLcar.com for more news, views, and of course, really cool film gear reviews. See you guys next time. Ciao.